Welcome to Prep for the Prince with me, Jazz Ellis, teaching you how to prepare for marriage as a Christian woman, whether you are single, dating, or engaged. So much goes into preparing for your future husband and learning how to be a wife God's way. Here's to preparing for happily ever after by learning how to prepare to be a wife while single, all things godly wife preparation while dating, and preparing to be a Christian wife throughout your engagement season. Let's get you prepped for Prince Charming. I'm cheering you on as your life story and your love story unfold. So good, Jessica. This has been so good. 14. What are some skills that you have needed in marriage and or wished that you had learned prior to marriage? So ideas of skills these ladies could be working on developing right now while they're single, dating, or engaged, like cooking, cleaning, sewing, gardening, finances, time management, organizing, wherever, go with it.
So all of the homemaking skills, I believe, are vital. I think it is a unique calling that we have as women. Paul tells us that we are to be the manager of the home. I don't think that's an archaic or old-fashioned principle. I think that is one of our God-given roles. It's a privilege. It's a blessing. It's the way we were made. And so anything you can do to develop homemaking skills, all the things Jasmine named, from enrolling in learning about gardening or sewing, maybe not so much, although I have used that a lot in my life. In fact, I'm making a t-shirt quilt for my daughter right now with all her
that's so neat.
Her high school t-shirts for her to take off to college with her. And it's just something, as a woman, it is in us to be domestic. We love to do that. So, and I used to make curtains when we had no money and I was wanting to redecorate my house in the early years. So sewing is still useful. But the highest one I would rank, and cooking goes without saying, although my husband loves to cook also, so we actually do that together now. But for like 15, 20 years, I was the one cooking 3 meals a day all the time. And that's a valuable skill, to cultivate a love for cooking. It will save you money and it will make you healthier. But the one I wanted to focus on that I think I'm the most grateful for coming into marriage knowing, and I've had to grow in it even more, is budgeting. I don't think most of us have a good idea of finances, that we haven't lived on a budget and known how to physically write a budget out. And that has helped our marriage so much, because for 15 to 17 years, we were a single income family so that I could stay home. And how we lived the way we did on my husband's salary, I don't know, except that we were creative budgeters. And that's a skill my parents had taught me. And that's something I would learn to do now. I would learn, how does money work so that it can work for you? How do you manage it well? And how do you always keep your input, your income, greater than your outgoing money? Because we live in a consumer society, and with the click of a button, we can order something on Amazon, and with 20 clicks, we can be in debt before we know it. And it's become the norm for people to have credit card bills that just roll over constantly. And we really need to push back against that and resist against that. Number one, because it's feeding a consumer rather than a producer mentality. And number two, it's just wrong. That's living beyond our means. So the number one homemaking skill in running a family for me has been learning to manage finance as well. Now, I was blessed to come into marriage with a lot of the other already, thanks to my mom, who had taught me the cooking and the cleaning and the sewing. And so, but I would say budgeting. And the second most important would be whatever is most important to your husband. So you may have a husband that food is a big deal, or that cleaning is a big deal, or that, I don't know, you knowing how to fix his shirts or iron his shirts just the right way is a big deal. Then I would learn those things well, so that you can uniquely cater to him be a blessing to him in that area. But finances, that goes without saying. I would understand the inside and out of money.
I love how you said to cater to what's important to your husband, because I got so blessed, ladies. Like, James doesn't care about meals as much as normal guys. Like my brother, my brother's a human vacuum cleaner that eats like 5 meals a day because he's massive. Anyway, James, he appreciates what I do to put food on the table, but he doesn't care like some men do. And so it's really important just to also find that out while you're dating, because if you're marrying a guy that's expecting a steak and potatoes meal for dinner every night, that's important to know, especially if you're like me, who did not grow up learning to cook, because my mom hates to cook. I am overcoming hating to cook in Jesus' name, but I still dislike it strongly. If I can't use the word hate, I will say strongly dislike. But anyway, just learning these things ahead of time is going to save you so much stress and a headache when you get married and you're like, oh my, how do I cook? What do I even make for dinner? Like the first week of marriage, I was like, what do I even make? And I'm like scrambling my brain thinking of what did mom make us? Like I wasn't prepared in that area, and I could have been. And that's why my whole heart behind this group is just, I want to save you guys stress and make the transition fun and seamless. And then I wanted to throw in a quick question, Jessica. How about those of us who were never taught? Do you suggest just finding a mentor, classes? What do you think?
Yes. So either enroll in a local class in a community college, or as you know, you can learn anything on YouTube. Yes. You can learn anything on YouTube. So actually, now that I am home, I'm in a season where I have some free time at home. I'm coming out of the most busiest season ever of my life where I'm never home because I was working so much. So now I'm home. And my goal is to learn how to make sourdough bread. So I've been watching this lady on YouTube. You can absolutely learn anything on YouTube. So you like schedule time in and say, okay, I'm going to learn how to make scones. I'm going to learn how to make a beef roast, and pick your project for that week and do it. Buy you a cookbook, and just a simple one, like one for beginners, and decide I'm going to cook through this year. It goes back to what seems to be one of Jasmine's themes, which is preparation time is never wasted time if you use it. So use this. You're not just waiting. You're in a preparation time. And here's the thing. If you never get married, even if, you are still called to develop yourself as a person and become the fullest version of who you can be. And so these are the common arts, all of these culinary arts. And as a female, it fulfills you to be able to create and produce, whether that is cooking, sewing, decorating, putting outfits together, doing hair. There is something creative in us as females. And so I would look to be cultivating that in yourself. Pick a once a month trait you're going to work on, and get somebody else to do it with you.
Yes. All right. Number 15. Do you have any other ideas we haven't yet talked about regarding how these ladies can better prepare for marriage? I know we've hit so much, but it's just like if you have a random thought come to mind.
Mm-hmm. This is not random, and I almost hesitate to share it because it's prayer. And I feel like when an answer like this is given, that people tend to brush it off.
Wow.
But going back to my years in Honduras, when I was so alone, I had people around me because I was working as a full-time nurse at an orphanage. So I was surrounded by kids up till age 18. It was middle school, high school boarding orphanage. And they also took classes there. So I'm teaching, but I'm also operating as the nurse. So I'm saying that to say my days are very busy, yet I had never been lonelier. Have you ever been like that in your life? You're with people a lot, but you're very lonely still. And that was my year in Honduras. And so when I would go back to my room at night, to my only combat for that loneliness was journaling and prayer. And I am convinced that those nights praying, they laid the track for my life to run on. So I'm a person who likes to feel productive. I like to feel like I'm making advancements. I like to accomplish things. That's my natural nature. And so when I began to see prayer and time in prayer, not as just venting or being emotional, but laying a track for my future life to run on, it made me so motivated to pray, because I would feel like as I got before the Lord, whether that was praying in my understanding or praying in the Spirit, I began to really have the sensing or the become convinced that I was laying a track. And imagine like a railroad track, that I'm laying down a rail and hammering it in place, and I'm laying a rail and hammering it in place so that I'm building a pathway for the train of my life to run on, where I had places I wanted to go and things I wanted to do, metaphorically, places in life I wanted to go. And I began to convince myself my life train would never get to those places if I did not lay them out through prayer. And so my answer to the best way to prepare for your future life is your prayer life now. Because I truly believe my life is still running on tracks that were laid back during my single years. And I believe, I'm fully convinced my life would not be the same if I had not taken that year to dig in and pray.
Wow. All right, ladies, I hope you wrote that down. It's like schedule in prayer time. Be diligent about it. It's the most important thing you can do in your single season. That's so good. Number 16. Do you believe in the concept of the one?
That's very hard to answer, because
I know.
Once you're so in love, you can't imagine anybody else. And because of the nature of my story with my husband and the way I felt like God orchestrated it, I can't imagine anybody else. But here's the reality. So you have to give me two answers.
Yes,
in that way, does my heart believe in that idea? Something in me does. But here's the reality. What if someone has not married the one? That does not mean that it suddenly cannot become the one. And so that's why ultimately I think the idea of the one can disenchant us, because if you're so convinced on that, then if you believe you haven't married the one, you're going to be miserable the rest of your life. And that is not how God operates, because he is a God who restores things or makes things new. So the one you need to be married to is the one you are married to. And I would say, to prevent the heartache that could involve, that's why you want to be doing all the other things, so that to the best of your ability and control, you are marrying the one that would be for you.
Yeah.
And that's the only way I know how to answer that question, because I'm a romantic enough that I want to say, yes, I do believe there's one, and I married him and thank the Lord. But I imagine, what if I had a different major when I was back in college, and I never wound up on the mission field, and I didn't meet William, and I married some other man? So what? I missed God's whole will for my life? God is too gracious for that. That can't be. So that's the only reason why I would say no, I don't believe in the concept of the one, because God knows how to change things and do things. However, that takes a lot of faith and a lot of tears and a lot of overcoming. So to avoid that, position yourself now to where you do wind up with the one who is God's perfect choice for you.
Yes. And once you get married, he becomes the one, because
That's true.
you're
At
in
that
it.
point, he is the one.
Yep. So once you're married, he's the one.
Because you picked him.
Of course, unless there's infidelity or abuse, like you always have to put those disclaimers that like the Bible throws out there. But number 17, how did you know your husband was the right man for you?
Well, at this point, we're kind of repeating because of everything I said early on. He checked all those boxes, and the important fundamentals, he was all of those things. But I remember my mom specifically asking me, because I met him on the mission field. My parents, they didn't know him. They didn't meet him until months later. And they were so surprised, since I had never dated anyone, they were so surprised at me being smitten and in love with this man. And my mom said, how do you know that William is the one? And I answered before I even fully thought it out. And what I told her was, because he approaches everything different than I do in almost every situation. And where I have weaknesses and inconsistencies, he is strong. But yet where he has weaknesses and inconsistencies, I am very strong. Our personalities naturally are on two different ends of the spectrum. So even though we were the same in fundamentals and in our worldview, we brought two different sides of, it's like he brought the right eye and I brought the left eye to view things. And even though that's why, one reason I chose him, that still caused the most conflict in our relationship, as I shared earlier. And it wasn't until I really learned to value that again and say, wow, all those things that have irritated me about him, I have to remember those were the very things that I need. And a specific example of that is like, I am a great starter. I'm very visionary. I'm a good, I'm a good starter of projects and things. And William is not. He's extremely slow to start something. But yet he is a great finisher, whereas I am not. I tend to start a lot of things really well and then trickle off. He is a great finisher. And so you put us together and we are an amazing team because of that. Because if he catches this vision and this momentum I have at the beginning and gets on board with it, then he will make sure we follow it through and it becomes a success. Whereas I would have tapped out and started something new. And so look for that. Someone who, remember, not completes you, but complements your weaknesses well. And so those very things that could irritate, they are my favorite qualities in him.
Yes. And just because you do something one way doesn't mean that's the right way. And
True.
It's so imperative. Even like I have a tendency to overwork. James is very good about having a work-life balance. He works very hard, but he also knows when it's time to rest. I need that in him. I need to get reminded that I need to rest. Well, sometimes if I'm like, hey, sweetie, like I've got this checklist. We got to get this done today in order to meet this deadline. I help him stay on track in that way. So it's another way to compliment. But I love that you touched on that, Jessica, just with the opposites attract, because people are like, oh, go for the complete opposite. And it's like, no, like the fundamentals are the same. Just
Yes.
how you approach things can be different. Okay, 18. What is a helpful tip of yours for healthy communication in marriage, or how to prevent miscommunication from happening in the first place?
So you may have to be in a relationship to fully understand this, but you have got to learn how your mate, your spouse processes things. I am a verbal processor, and I like to talk things out, and I like to respond, and I'm a quick responder. So like Jasmine asking me these questions, they're very easy for me to respond to because I process quickly, and then I like to verbally answer. My husband is not that way at all. Now I would say it has nothing to do with intelligence or wisdom, because he definitely exceeds me in those areas. But he is an internal processor, and he does not do that with words. He does it with thoughts. And so I had to learn to have good communication. I had to learn that I could not ask something and expect a response immediately, because his brain does not work that way. And by the same token, he had to learn that if I'm feeling something, or if there's been a situation or a disagreement, I can't work through it unless I say it out loud. And so I needed him to hear me talk about it. And so communication is an exchange of ideas and thinking, but that does not come out the same for everybody. That's personality dependent or processing dependent. So you need to find out what that person, your partner, your spouse, what their processing method is, and give them space for that. Because if you want them to process the way you do, you're just going to be beating your head against a wall.
That's so true, because we're all wired so differently.
Mm-hmm.
God wired them how they are. You cannot wire them differently. They can do certain things to hone in their personality or how they're wired, but they can't change the fundamental way that God wired how they think. I'm like William. I think internally. I have to have time to think things out. If I was given a list of these questions, I would have been praying over them, writing them down for a week. I think it's an amazing trait of yours that you can process verbally. I'm not that way. I have to have time to think things out. But when you realize that people are different, it's going to save you so much frustration.
Yeah, and that's true in any relationship. Usually when people are pressed to have to give an answer, we say that they either go into T-Rex mode or turtle mode. And T-Rex mode means they start to fight, or turtle mode is they just withdraw into themselves even more. And so if my goal is for my husband to talk to me and tell me his thoughts, I can't push him to turtle mode, which is to retreat even more. And me saying, tell me, what do you feel? Or what were you thinking? All that does is make him retreat into himself more. And so what I've learned to do is to give advance notice and say, hey, that thing that happened with the kids, I need to talk about that. So later tonight, could we sit down and do that? Or do you have time tomorrow that we need to talk that through, because I need closure on it? And that way he could prepare and get his thoughts together. What I used to do that caused frustration is be like, we need to talk about this now, blah, 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 and I would start processing. And he can't handle that. Literally, the neurons in his brain cannot process information like that. And so that's part of love and respect.
I love that. And so much of conflict resolution or preventing conflict happens by communicating effectively. So
Yes.
Granted, we just kind of covered this next question. So if there's anything else to add on to it, go for it. But what's a helpful tip of yours for conflict resolution in marriage, or how to prevent conflict from happening in the first place? Could be other than communication or another facet of it.
Well, that one we just talked about is one of our biggest personally, and I think it is for most people. So make sure you learn how to have good exchanges and that you figure out how that person processes. But the other way for that makes the most conflict, I think, in any relationship is when a person feels unloved or unsecure in the relationship. And so when that's happening to you, you're going to have to identify the root of the thing and the why. And usually for a female, it's because we don't feel secure, whether that's we don't feel financially secure, we don't feel physically safe and secure with him, we don't feel we feel like he's looking at other women, and so we don't feel emotionally secure. If our security is threatened, usually a woman, we want to fight, however our method of fighting is. Well, we want to pick, there's conflict. For some women, it's financial security. Like if you feel like you're not taking care of us and I don't know these are going to get paid and that stresses me out, well, then every interaction you have, that root is under it. So find out what your kind of trigger is that makes you feel insecure and what his is. With a man, it's usually that they don't feel respected or they don't feel like they're being a success in general in life. And if he feels that, any little thing you say is going to trigger him because he hears it through the lens of, oh, you think I'm messing up, or you think I'm not a success, or you don't think I have what it takes, when that could not have been your intent at all. But same with us. Once we get a little jealousy nagging at us or an insecurity, anything he says, we interpret through that lens. So be aware. Be aware of your communication style. Be aware of your security triggers.
Absolutely. Miss Jessica, any other parting words of encouragement or advice that's come to mind for these ladies?
I wish that I had something that would be like the magic bullet for you. But that's probably different for different people. So this is the general thing I would say is any season you're in, because I use this all the time right now as I have shifting seasons in my life. There is a phrase that I have lived by, and that is that preparation time is never wasted time. Because you can waste time. You can have a season and waste it. But if you're using that season to prepare for the next, you haven't wasted the time. And my husband gave me that phrase years ago when I was wanting to do several things, but I was weary in being home all the time and homeschooling my kids, and I was starting to itch I was coming into a new season actually, but it just wasn't here quite yet. And so I'm like, but what do I do with this feeling? What do I do with these pent up emotions? And he said, you channel them into preparation. And so how do you be a good preparer, or what do I mean by preparation time? I mean, what are you listening to? What are you learning? What are you reading? Who are you hanging out with? How are you growing yourself? That could be physical workouts, soul workouts, spirit workouts, intellectual. It could be going back to school. It could be finishing school. Use whatever season you're in to be a diligent preparer, because I'm telling you, your next season is contingent upon how well you steward this one that you're in right now.
It's like a snowball effect. That's why we're trying to make it not such a massive snowball that feels like it's going to run you over when you're like, I'm overwhelmed by all of this that I have to learn now that I have a ring on my finger. We're going to prevent that if we can.
If you enjoyed this today, would you please take a second and give this podcast a 5-star rating or give this video a like? This will let me know that you're enjoying this content and that it's helping you. And would you also become a subscriber? This lets me know that you're looking forward to more content like this. Feel free to also check out my other podcast called My Royal Reality. Lastly, be sure to share this with a friend who would also benefit from hearing it. I really appreciate your support, and I'm cheering you on as your life story and love story unfold.